All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining for our Pullman forum here this morning. Matt Skinner, our Associate Vice President for Finance, is going to give an update for us here today. Before we get it started, just a reminder, we will be taking questions throughout the presentation through modhelp.wsu.edu. This allows us to track your questions. We'll try to answer as many as we can in the Q&A portion of today's meeting, but if we can't get to it, it gives us the opportunity to follow up with you after. All right, so I'd like to turn it over to Matt to start off our presentation.
Great, thanks, Annie. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining. First, just want to thank you all for taking the time to join via Zoom. This feels a little bit different to us all. We would much rather be in person right now talking with each other, but we appreciate everybody's understanding as we try to accomplish a whole series of meetings and updates this week via Zoom. We are certainly just trying to demonstrate an abundance of caution in regards to COVID-19, and so just holding this large group meeting via Zoom today seemed like the right way to approach that. So we'll all be patient with each other as we go ahead and work through this together. So what are we here to talk about today? As you're all aware from a series of communications that came out yesterday, with the kind of a capstone of that communication from President Schultz and Vice President Pearson yesterday, we've made a decision to extend the time frame or timeline to implement Workday and are changing our launch date from July 2020 to January 2021. And so we just wanted to get out in the community at every campus and with different groups and share the message. So yesterday we had an opportunity to meet with university leadership, president's cabinet, and deans, as well as finance officers. This morning we had a really good session with members of the Change Network and heard lots of good questions and feedback from that group. And now look forward to doing the same here with the Pullman Campus Open Forum, and then we'll follow up this week with open campus forums via Zoom in Spokane, Everett, Tri-Cities, and Vancouver. So look forward to the opportunity later on to get your feedback and thoughts about where we're going on this project. I need to apologize to those that have been into some of our other presentations over the last 24 hours. A lot of the material we'll talk about today might be repetitive. We're trying to cover the same major agenda and themes at every campus forum, but certainly the feedback and question and answer session tends to be a little bit different with each group we meet with. So during our time together today, we'd like to first take a moment to reflect back at the major activities that we've completed by working together over the last year. A lot of great work has been accomplished in the last year as we've all worked together to implement Workday at WSU. We'll then talk a little bit about some of the current challenges that we see in the project and eventually talk about how those current challenges led to a need to give us some more time in the timeline. Then we'll look at a high-level review of the new timeline for the project and then address some questions that have already started to come in as we've met with different groups about what to expect as we move forward over the next several months. And then, as I mentioned before, we really look forward to question and answer with each one of you and getting your feedback, questions, and what kind of questions you think you'll receive as you're back in your offices last night and today from people around you in your campuses, colleges, and departments. So just a reminder to everybody, if you have questions, since we're expecting a pretty large group today, we've turned off the chat. We're hoping people will submit those to this modhelp.wsu.edu. We look forward to hearing from you there. So what is the Modernization Initiative? I think we all know the answer to that question at this point, but this is a university-wide effort to overcome potential business system failure and improve our support for WSU's research, instruction, and service mission by replacing our 40-year-old mainframe system. We hope to go from our AIS screen on the left to something a bit more modern in Workday, and we're looking forward to that. been really fun for me on a personal level to think back. You know, it was just about a year ago in January and February where we had opportunity to visit each campus in an open forum and talk and kick off officially the project to implement Workday at WSU. And it was really fun to sit back and recognize the great amount of work that's been accomplished in that short 12-month time period since we kicked off the project. And that is a tribute to so many people here in the room and at all of our campuses who really jumped in and helped us think through issues, helped us assess business processes and how those things work. And certainly as a tribute to an outstanding modernization team who have given tireless effort so far on this project to get us to the great point we're at right now. So we think back to February to June time period, we were in what we called our discovery and architect phase. We convened those large group discovery sessions where we had 30, 40, 50, 60 people in Zoom or in a room to talk about what some of the current pain points are with our current system and how we'd like to work moving forward. We had over 1,850 participants in those discovery workshops during those first few months. We also got started on some data cleanup, and many of you are involved with a massive amount of cleanup that we've been able to do there. And we also did some early preview sessions on a blueprint for foundation data model, what our chart of accounts could look like in the future. And we began some real preliminary work to start to map out our supervisor organizational structure, who reports to who in the university. We knew that was going to be a significant work area for us because today, the only places an organizational chart is found is in different spreadsheets or Visio documents in each department or area. After working on discovery and architect, we moved into the configure and prototype phase starting in July, and we continued on that through November. During this time, a lot was accomplished. First, we pivoted a little bit from those large discovery meetings where we had large groups of individuals brainstorming and talking about challenges and opportunities to smaller function-specific work groups. We had 40 of those work groups with about 360 members across the different teams who really worked directly with the modernization team and the consultants to begin thinking about how we should configure and how the business processes should work in Workday. We also began designing and building over 40 different integrations to help Workday talk to other WSU systems, to outside entities like banks and financial institutions for the university, as well as to state agency systems. And we worked in early stages with each one of the areas on campus to map out security roles to positions, to build out a foundation data model for each area, and to start mapping out what a supervisor organization could look like for every unit on campus. We also took a big step on our data cleanup, which we're super excited about. With the help of so many people, we actually inactivated over 15,000 accounts that had been dormant or not used for a number of years. We cleaned up our vendor file, which is where we keep track of those that are authorized to do business with the university, by 91%. And finally, we launched our Change Network with about 400 members. They continue to meet on a monthly basis to get updates, general updates about the project, and perhaps just as important, the Change Network gives us real-time feedback about what the questions are, what's going on in their department or unit, and helps us anticipate what we need to do moving forward. Finally, in November, we got started with end-to-end testing, and the concept of this phase of testing is that we want to see how the business processes we built in Workday are functioning from the beginning to the end. So that means initiating or starting a transaction in the system, moving that through all the approval steps, and seeing it post to be finished. And we had a goal of doing about 3,700 different scenarios there. We've had about 100 different testers from outside the modernization team helping with that testing to assess how the business processes were working. And we also built our second tenant of WSU to make Workday look like the configuration for WSU, bringing over 3 million records with a 99% success rate on that data conversion, which is outstanding for this phase of the project. One of our goals that we talked about a year ago when we did the open forums to kick off the project, one of the 5 E's that we talked about was to engage the campuses, each community. And we've worked hard to do that through monthly newsletters, twice weekly updates, new videos and website improvements and handouts that largely came at the request of our Change Network for information they could share with their departments. We've been at every campus on a quarterly basis, and we continue to work on a Train the Trainer program to have nearly 40 individuals prepared to be a trainer when we get into the training phase for Workday. So it was really helpful, and I hope we can take a moment to pause and just to recognize the outstanding work that's been done, and for me to express gratitude for each of you and your contributions and hard work to help us get to this point. We're at a pretty exciting time in the project now that we have just 4 major milestones left before we begin using Workday. And those are shown here on the screen. We need to complete that end-to-end testing that I described earlier. Then we need to move into user acceptance testing. During user acceptance testing, we'll have about 500 different individuals from all of our campuses involved in the system testing to make sure that it works. After we wrap up user acceptance testing, we'll begin training the community to use Workday, and then we'll be prepared to launch it. Now, as we think back to the work that we've been contributing to over the last year, I think it comes as no surprise that this has been challenging work to move away from our pieces of paper-based processes and our 1980s, 1970s cloud system of AIS. Moving to a modern online system has been hard work. It's also been really rewarding to see different groups on campus come together and try to tackle challenging issues and try to think of new ways of working in a more efficient and effective way. I'm really grateful for all the contributions that have happened there. From a project perspective right now, we face a number of challenges that probably were the drivers for the reason to extend the project timeline by 6 months. First, in end-to-end testing, we've made great progress on those, and nearly all of the 3,700 testing scenarios are complete. Yet we need a little more time to come back to those testing scenarios and address any issues, bugs, or defects that were noted during those testing scenarios to make sure that that defect has been resolved and fixed and retested and signed off as addressed. That will take a few more weeks to get that work done. On the integration side, we have been testing integrations, but we have a number of integrations that are frankly big and complex, and they continue to be a challenge for us. I'll just share 2 examples of those types of integrations that have been most challenging. The first is a requirement that we send our financial, payroll, and some select HR information to the Office of Financial Management in Olympia on a monthly basis. That is called AFRS, or the Agency Financial Reporting System. And building that integration is very complex, as we need to take WSU's information and map it into the state's format and the state's accounting structure. And we continue to work on getting that built out and tested, and it frankly continues to challenge us a little bit. We also have some interactions with other state agencies and their systems, which are challenging and really important that we get correct. One of those other examples is with the Department of Retirement Systems. We need to keep our data in sync between the Department of Retirement Systems and WSU to make sure that we have the eligibility and other important information for retirement plans functioning correctly for all of our employees. That integration is progressing and being tested, but it is big and complex, and we knew that going in. We need a little more time to focus on those integrations of particular complexity, as well as finishing out testing of the rest of our integrations. I'll jump over here to a picture that maybe kind of describes this visually. When we talk about 4 major milestones left in the project, we've tried to represent that here on this slide with the 4 red boxes. And this is a little bit what we're facing right now. Before we feel comfortable finishing end-to-end testing and moving over to user acceptance testing, we need to finish a number of key activities shown in the gray boxes. And really, back in early January, early February, this is the pressure we started to feel as a project team, that either any one of these activities, if we needed to spend a little more time on integrations, we could probably do that, but it started to feel, because so many of these activities were running in parallel with competing priorities, that if we spent more time on one particular area, that it threatened another area, that we would not be successful in getting that work done. So it felt like it was important that we get these items all to a strong place before we exit end-to-end testing. We also had an opportunity, as we assessed our status, to look out at what other Workday projects we're experiencing and how they were solving their challenges and how long it took them to go live. We did some assessment and benchmarking there. We also looked at our past issue experience with large system rollout, and we made a decision that we wanted to make sure we got our testing done, that we tested the system to the best of our ability during end-to-end, so we could have a productive and successful user acceptance testing round after end-to-end testing completed. We wanted that all to go as smooth as possible. So with that analysis and consideration, we decided we needed a little more time to finish the testing of the system. We decided that we would move forward with a 6-month window for that extra testing to occur. Now, it's kind of interesting, why did we choose 6 months? We initially started looking at some different time frames. We kicked around, could we go live or launch in September? Could we do something in October? But at the end of the day, it made most sense to try to pick a beginning of a fiscal year or beginning of a calendar year as our go live period. That's largely because we're going to go live with human resources, payroll, and financial activities all at the same time. So we wanted at least one of those begin dates to be clean from a planning perspective. So what are some benefits here that we think we'll see from extending the project timeline by the 6 months? We first come back to this visual representation of our 4 major milestones. And this is the first thing we think we'll feel right away, is we were able to take those important critical activities that were running all in parallel with competing deadlines to finish end-to-end testing. We're able to space those out just a little bit. So we have a little more time to work on things, to finish our testing, work on our integrations, continue to build out a financial data model and the supervisor org, without those all competing for time and attention of our resources, as well as subject matter experts around our many campuses. So spreading out the work, we think, is going to help us have a more successful end-to-end testing result and better prepare us when we move into user acceptance testing with the community. There's some other advantages of a January go live date that might be interesting to the community. First is, when we start the fall semester every fall, that's a very busy time, as you're all aware, as we invite new students to campus. We onboard a lot of new faculty and staff to help to serve those students. And there was a little bit of concern that the July deadline was going to run up too close to onboarding those new staff and faculty. So by being in January, that is an added bonus, that we're going to be able to onboard those new employees as we start the fall semester. And they'll already be in the system when we move forward in January. Another concern that we were working to address was, with the July 2020 go live date, was the mass salary increase that will be given to classified employees during that month. And there was a little bit of concern about launching Workday and then immediately processing a mass salary increase, which would impact the paycheck of so many employees. We'll feel better about being able to process that and have a few pay periods under our belt before we need to do that again in Workday. But 2 other advantages that kind of come to mind is January, is we will have a real clean cutoff for our payroll and taxation reporting. All the W-2 reporting we do will be clean, because we'll be able to report calendar year 2020 all out of one system. And finally, as many of you may be aware, as we prepare to move from AIS to Workday, we will have a series of cutover activities to help us move from one system to another. And that will include some short periods of time where we'll need to slow down or even stop processing some transactions. There was some concern as we met across the university community with performing that slowdown and cutover of transactions right next to fiscal year end. And we believe that doing that cutover activity during the December time period, where we traditionally have reduced operations for the campus, might help us weather that cutover a little bit better. We have a natural slowdown in the number of transactions during that period of time. So looking ahead at this new timeline at a very summary level, what does that mean for us? We can take a look at it on this slide. You're going to see from March to August, you'll see the modernization team really working hard to finish up end-to-end testing of our systems. Finish up end-to-end testing of our systems and then transition into report development and training during that time. Then in August and September, we'll work on user acceptance testing. Well, again, we'll have about 500 end users across the university helping to perform that testing. And then we'll begin our formal training program and preparing users of Workday to use that system in October, and that will continue through December 2020. Then as we turn the calendar year to January 2021, we will start using Workday. That will be an exciting time for us. And just like we talked about at the kickoff and have been talking about since for the last year, we will immediately start into a stabilization and support period as we begin working together using Workday as our primary HR, payroll, and finance tool. There will be bumps along that journey, and there'll be a lot of change for each of us as we adopt using a new system. And so we want to recognize that it'll take about 1 year to stabilize that system for each of us to properly perform each of the business functions and processes that happen over the course of a year. And starting in January 22, we'll be ready to start our optimization of the system. So looking a little more detailed at the next 6 months, what can you expect to see? Again, you'll see the modernization team really focused on completing end-to-end testing of business processes and finishing the build and testing of integrations. That will be our top priority for the next couple months. We'll also continue to have a fair bit of interaction with each campus and area to finish mapping out the supervisor organizational structure, the foundation data model, and also working with each unit to finalize the role to position mapping, making sure we get the right position and employee in the right security role to help workflow happen across the system from initiate to approve transactions. And there may be opportunity for just a touch more data cleanup that could happen. We don't anticipate a lot there, largely thanks to the outstanding work that's already happened to date. But there could be a bit more of that. From this next 6 month period, we'll continue to be active, communicating in monthly newsletters, updating our website, providing new resources and videos, as well as meeting with the Change Network. I would note that our website was updated last night with the new project timeline at a high level, as well as new frequently asked questions. If you haven't had a chance to go out there and look, you might find some great information out there about the change in the project timeline. We'll also continue our regular meetings with AFOs from all campuses and areas to make sure that we're staying aligned and communicating with what's happening. And this will all be kind of topped off, if you will, in starting user acceptance testing next August. So before we open it up to questions and feedback, hopefully we have quite a few questions coming in already. We look forward to discussing those. We want to take a minute to discuss some questions that have already started to flow in as we start to talk with a few different leadership groups yesterday. The first common question we received is, what will this extension in the project timeline do to the project budget and the scope and the launch date? So we wanted to make sure we're really clear about that. The change of the project timeline will be accommodated within the project budget. There will be no increase and no change to the planned project budget. We knew that there would be a need for contingencies when we put the budget together, and this change of 6 months clearly falls within that project contingency budget. The scope of the project will also not change, and I think that's really important for all of us as we've talked to other universities and consultants that sometimes have extended the go-live date out on a project. This is one of the biggest risk areas for the project, is when you give yourself a little more time, there's a natural tendency to want to increase scope or begin unraveling some of the great work that's already been done. So we're going to be working our hardest to maintain our current scope of functionality that's already in the system. And again, a reminder that that launch date will be at the end or start of the calendar year as opposed to the end of the fiscal year. One other question that we've talked a little bit about and came up in leadership with university leadership was, how did we decide to extend the date, and when did we make that decision? And hopefully what we've talked about already helps give you some context and background about the project challenges and why we needed a little bit more time. From a decision perspective, we have a couple things that helped us get there. First, on a weekly basis, each of our project work streams are reporting status and progress every week to project leadership. Then on a monthly basis, the project leadership reports to the executive steering committee about what was accomplished during the month and any areas of delay or concern and how we can help overcome those. For several months, we've had some areas where we saw some slowdown, and then we were able to address it and feel like we had it back on track. But really, when we got into January, we started to get concerned about the amount of work that was left for end-to-end testing and if we would have enough available time and resources to address that testing. So we previewed that with the steering committee on February 25th, talked to them about those concerns, and they recommended a great discussion, actually gave us some different ideas about what we could pursue, different alternatives. We talked through lots of things over the course of that meeting, and we ended that meeting with them giving a charge to our executive sponsor, Stacy Pearson, that she should facilitate a decision during the week of March 2nd on what way we should go with the project as far as an extension. So we followed that guidance and spent a lot of time assessing and reviewing before we ultimately made this decision last week with Stacy about extending the project status. And we began communicating that decision to university leadership yesterday. So that's kind of the end of our formal prepared materials. Thanks for the opportunity to share that. Again, it feels a little different not being able to see people's faces, but thank you for listening to that content. I hope that was helpful. I encourage you to continue to stay informed. Like I mentioned earlier, the project website is updated. We'll continue to send out the monthly newsletter. If you haven't subscribed to that, please jump out to this web address and sign up to receive the monthly newsletter. And we have met with the Change Network already and given them a similar presentation, and many of the Change Network members will have information about the high-level direction on the project and how much time, why we extended for 6 months. So with that, we'd love to pause now, open it up to questions, feedbacks, thoughts, concerns, ideas, whatever is on your mind. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll answer as many of those as we can in the 20-25 minutes we have left. And then by bringing them through the mod help address here, we're able to keep track of those and follow up with any questions we weren't able to get answered during our time live together. So.
We have a question related to comp time usage and the deadline, and if that's changed. So the question is, with the change in the launch date of Workday, with the requirement for employees to use or be paid out for comp time changed to November, December 2020. Thanks, Gwen Anderson.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that question. In fact, that question also came up in our Change Network meeting today. So we've taken that down as a follow-up item. We need to work with our colleagues in Human Resources to see if there'll be any adjustment to that payout deadline that was set, and we should be able to get that resolved really quickly and let people know what the plan is there.
This next question is budget reports and state tax. when will we be able to see reports? I think most of us rely and reporting for 60% or more of our position, and it would be nice to see this as soon as possible. Also, with the state tax, most of us from Idaho have been waiting a very long time for this option, and is very disappointed here. We will be waiting longer.
Yeah, great questions. Thank you for sending those in. Let me start with the state tax one first. As you're aware, our plan for multi-state tax withholding, in particular for Idaho residents like myself and the person who submitted the question, our goal was to go live with Workday payroll without making significant changes to people's paychecks. And so we want to hold true with that same logic as we move into January, which means we will begin paying employees without multi-state income tax withholding when we go live on Workday, so we don't surprise anybody with a new deduction that's never been in their check before. And then we'll need to go through a coordinated and thoughtful onboarding into multi-state tax withholding at a later period. As far as reporting, that's a great question. We are making good progress on reporting. We are taking a multifaceted approach to addressing data needs on campus. First, as you may be aware, over the last 18 months, we collected an inventory of critical reports as we met with each area, and they gave us a list of their critical reports that they needed. We have since, with our reporting work group, reviewed that entire list to prioritize those and put those in a critical nature list that we can begin building those reports, and we're actively building many of those reports right now. I have Jason Stuckey here. I don't know if you have that number on the top of your head about how many reports have been built already and are ready to begin testing.
About 200.
So we have about 200 reports off that inventory that have already been custom built and ready for testing. And we're going to just proceed to continue building out that reporting inventory, as well as also trying to adopt something that will be a bit new to us here at WSU, which is the reporting dashboards, and how we can use dashboards to help deliver information to users of data. And we do have a really good presentation on the reporting strategy and what to expect from a reporting perspective. And so maybe we should schedule an opportunity with a broader group to share that information. We've shared it with several groups already. Have we done that at the Change Network yet? The reporting overview?
Okay, we have another, looks like this is a suggestion for, let me load this really quick. So it says, hi, updates need to be more frequent than monthly, also more demos since you have more time. So I can maybe answer the first part of this if you want to do this one jointly. So we are doing more than just monthly updates. We have a very active blog where we are posting monthly. So I would, what's that?
Twice a week.
Oh, sorry, twice a week. Thank you. Thank you for that correction, Emily. Twice a week. So there's a wealth of information out there, and I would encourage you to do that. And also sign up for our monthly newsletter, as Matt had mentioned earlier. So, and then for more demos, we will be using kind of our Change Network group to continue to highlight things, share things with that group each month. But in terms of really having more time, I don't think we really have more time in the way of being able to help me out here, Matt.
Well, I would just say I really appreciate the comment, and it's energizing to me that that is a frequent comment. People just can't wait to see more of Workday, to see how it's going to work, and even get trained in Workday. And I would say, please don't lose that excitement. We want everyone to feel that way. They just can't wait to get their hands on Workday. And we're just trying to balance that. There's not necessarily a science there. It's more of an art to balance our approach in that regard. I would note that our primary time for people to get hands-on use of Workday, to see fully how it's going to work and get trained on how it's working, is the training period. And that's what that on the new timeline, October, November, December will be for. We've talked to lots of other universities, and they've expressed concern that if they train too early, They find it's less successful. If they train too late, it's less successful. So we're trying to find a happy medium between those two ends of the spectrum, starting training in that October time period. We will though find opportunities to continue to provide demonstrations, and maybe the person that sent that question and can let us know if they're a participant on a change network or another group. Because some of our challenge is making sure we hit the right audiences. So we've done a number of demonstrations at the Change Network. They would like more demonstrations as well, but we've certainly shown recruitment for employees there. We've looked at how purchasing will happen in the new system. We've looked at travel reimbursement in the new system. Some demos like that, but we also need to make sure that we're hitting the right groups with those demonstrations. So whoever asked that question, if you can give us an idea, if you're a member of any of those groups, that might help us calibrate a bit. I guess the other thing I would add, just in full honesty, we are trying to balance right now our team's time, and we will continue to balance this. It takes time to set up and stage a demonstration with transactions and information to show how that works through the system. We'd love to do it because we love to share how Workday's going to work. We're trying to balance our desire to demo the system, which might be one of our favorite things to do, with testing the system, and we're really trying to focus for the next several weeks on making sure that what has been designed through our work group process is functioning as intended.
So the question with audit concern as our subject line, I'll repeat this. For sponsored programs, I am concerned about the audit issues that will come with working out of two different financial systems in the middle of our fiscal year. It is more of a concern from our state accounts that we have rather than our federal awards.
Well, can you repeat that again?
Sure.
Which part is more of a concern?
For sponsored programs, I'm concerned about the audit issues that will come with working out of two different financial systems in the middle of our fiscal year. It is more of a concern for our state accounts that we have rather than our federal awards. I don't know if we need to maybe ask for clarification there, or do you understand that one?
Yeah, this is Garrick. I think it's kind of it's an interesting perspective. I guess I think you could say that there's never a good time to convert grants, or there's always a good time to convert grants, because we'll never be able to sync up all of the deadlines, meaning we'll never be able to match a fiscal year for the state and a federal fiscal year for the feds, and then a calendar year for like the counties. All those years will always be sort of at each other. There would never be a good time from that perspective.
And different end dates on the grant.
Yeah, and then I guess from the other perspective too, we have to convert life to date on everything. So every transaction will come over for any grant that's active. So hopefully that'll alleviate some of the concern from an audit concern issue. We will, and this is true of a July 1 date or a January 1 date, that documentation will have to be pulled out of each system based on audit needs kind of as we work to convert, and we flush out grants through our legacy system. That's a concern either way. I hope I helped answer the question. I definitely understand the perspective, but I don't know that we could ever marry up all of the fiscal years or all of the different grant timelines.
Thanks, Greg, that was great information. I would just add, we still are working a bit through what the data conversion will look like. There'll be some changes. Grants will largely convert as we were planning. There'll be some changes to those state accounts, as was referenced in the question. So we look forward to sharing a little bit more information as we know more what transactions will come over for the non-grant accounts and what will remain in AIS. And maybe that will help all of us plan for and avoid any audit risk as we make that transition.
So this one says, importance of end user documentation and training. What is being done to ensure adequate time for the development of end user documentation and training materials? I've often seen this phase of an enterprise software rollout left to the last minute, with screens still changing daily while trainers are trying to develop printed documentation and train end users.
Well, that was a great question, and actually a great perspective, because when we looked at the earlier chart with all of those gray bars stacked on top of it, each other. One of those was training development. That was the situation we were starting to get into, where we were still testing the system, screens were still changing. That was starting to delay our ability to develop training materials. So that's one of the reasons why we extended by 6 months. We think that we're able to unstack, if you will, the project activities, and now we'll have some dedicated time with a system that's been tested through end-to-end testing to finish building out those training materials. To be real honest, as we talked about different alternatives here, some universities or consultants would recommend when you start to get tight on remaining time left that you postpone training materials and that you postpone reporting. That wasn't something that felt viable to us at WSU. We want to deliver the best base training program we can for Workday. And so part of the driver for that decision was to extend to get the training materials done. So reminder on training, some things that you can expect when we get into October. We'll have quick reference guides built and ready to go. We have about 120 of those in scope right now. Those will be quick action documents that help individuals know how to get a process done, whether that's how do I submit my travel reimbursement, how do I procure an item, those kind of basic processes will be outlined in quick reference guides. We're also building out a number of online simulations or instructor-led courses that will provide more detail about how to perform specific functionality or functions in the system. So both of those are in the process of being built, and we will be working to train up, as we mentioned on the earlier slide, about 40 individuals who will be trained up on Workday who can help facilitate those training sessions as well. Thank you, that's a great question.
So those are all the questions we've received so far.
Oh boy, really? Wait just a minute here to see if anybody has any last minute questions or feedback that they want to send in. We'll just pause here for a few minutes, see if anything comes in. Okay, any other questions come flying in there last minute?
We haven't received any.
Okay, well, with that, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap up. Again, I want to thank everybody for taking the time to meet virtually today. Wish we were in person, face to face, but it's been great to be able to share information via Zoom today. And we look forward to moving ahead over the next several months with the campus community, as well as in our next step being able to provide a more detailed overview of the next steps and project plan that might be helpful as each one of you are planning activities within your area of responsibility. So with that, thank you to everybody for joining us. Hope you have a great day.